Welcome, Beauty.
Yes. Good evening.
Good
Mm,
evening. Thanks for joining us. All right, so
mm.
we're going to get started. We're at 7:04. I will
Okay.
go ahead and share my screen. And welcome everyone to our second session of the New LaVilla's Fundraising School. I am Dr. V. Brooks Dunbar, that's short for Valicia Brooks Dunbar. And I have been a fundraiser now for more than a decade, starting with working for a statewide nonprofit, raising funds annually, about $5 million a year for this regional nonprofit, which received funding from local, state, federal, and private sources. The agency was responsible for the regional Meals on Wheels program, but also provided services for capital campaign projects, wellness projects, and they also supported private pay elderly and seniors who could afford their own meals. So we had a large range of fundraising activities and projects, and that's what we want to talk about during this series is how as business owners, nonprofits, and even individuals, now that we have crowdfunding available, how do we raise money and how do we understand how fundraising activities are structured? Because they've been around for a very long time. We've been around for a very long time at the university level, at the uh, nonprofit level. However, we may go by different names. May go by advancement officers, my title was development officer when I was working for the university. And then in the nonprofit setting, I was a grant writer
Eh?
slash researcher.
Are you talking
So
to me?
we so we are going to talk about all of that through this series. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to put your name in the chat, your name in the chat as well as your question. We will be streaming these live via Facebook today, but moving forward, we will be streaming live via YouTube. And so you'll have an opportunity to review these in your own time and record, take the tips, take the information that's shared, and use it in real time to work on your particular project. I think I saw Joanna. Thank you, Joanna, for being here. And so today's outline is we're going to start with a review of week one. Each week, I want us to build on what we learned from the previous week, and then also start to look at some real case examples. So we'll always use the New LaVilla as our lead case example. But if you have a fundraising project or have experience, we do want this to be a train the trainer type of environment as well. Please, by all means, share what you've learned in your own setting, because each setting, each cause, each campaign, even the timing within itself is so very different. We're going to, after we go over our examples of planning for step one, we're going to look at the meat of today's discussion, which is team building, how to develop partnerships, and how to manage those team volunteers and partners that come along. And we'll create an activities map that will help you to start to frame out what your fundraising structure will look like. And then we'll open up the questions for discussion. So the purpose of this entire series and this entire conversation is, of course, to support the New LaVilla fundraising campaign. It is an education component of this fundraising campaign because I love to learn in real time. And we also, while we're learning in real time and actively involved in a campaign, we can talk about issues and challenges, opportunities, wins in real time that we sometimes may forget unless we're ripe and ready in the moment. So we're going to talk about those. The New LaVilla, we are slowly approaching a relaunch based on lessons learned from our crowdfunding campaign in 2025. And I am an open book about that experience. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll read and learn about that process and what our biggest takeaways were. our number one takeaway was that we did not give ourselves enough lead time to build community. And this education series is part of building that community of people who are also involved, who have an affinity with this fundraising world and industry, because it is a competitive industry. I say that all the time. It is very competitive. And I, as a fundraiser, am more likely to support someone who is also a fundraiser. And so that's how this community is going to evolve and, come to being a truly supportive, nurturing ecosystem of impact investors nationwide. So last week we did talk about, this concept of storytelling and the psychology of the donor. Donors are people who typically care about causes, who typically have experience for themselves, what the offer or what the campaign is about, and they appreciate and value the story behind it. So that is the most important thing. Number one is that you have to tell that story and you have to make it compelling to different types of people through different lenses and through different perspectives. Once you start to tell those stories, there should be a mechanism for connecting with and re-engaging with the individuals who are interested in hearing more about what you're doing. And that's how you build out and develop your email campaign. Now, typically I will say that start with at least an email campaign of 5,000. That is very small. That is for a small, localized campaign or a small funding raise. So for example, we are raising 2 million. We need more than 5,000, but a baseline list of 5,000 is enough for you to start to cultivate that list so that you can ask them to help bring others in. So that would be that silent phase, that planning phase where you're starting 12 months out and you're slowly building that list and finding new followers. I spoke about capital campaigns and major gifts and the different types of campaign structures. So the new LaVilla is a capital project. We are raising for a building. Major gifts, the example of that is when you have donors who are able to give. Typically, that's about a $5,000 donor for a private nonprofit. It can be a $50,000 donor for a university. So again, it depends on the organization and what you're raising for. But these are the different types of campaigns and fundraising activities that are out there. Since crowdfunding has evolved for about the past, 20 years, I believe is when the Jobs Act passed, 2012 or something like that. We have now gone into this crowdfunding community where every individual donor is giving at different levels, at multiple levels, and the numbers of individual donors that you need are exponentially more because the donor amounts on average are much smaller. So crowdfunding is where you're looking for a larger, expansive community to support your project. When you go through the work of putting together a regulated crowdfunding campaign, so you have your private crowdfunding campaigns like what's the popular one? Can anyone give me a popular one? It's usually there to raise funds for funerals, to raise funds for a health issue. So those kind of smaller individual crowdfunding campaigns are very popular and can be very successful. Then you have your regulated crowdfunding that deal more so with investing, and those are highly regulated, highly structured. So our initial round for the New LaVilla was a regulation CF campaign. So that was highly regulated, highly structured. We had to go and submit a proposal to the Securities and Exchange Commission for that campaign. Peer-to-peer fundraising is where we are now, where we are asking individuals who are aware of our campaign, who know about our campaign, who have an affinity with our campaign, to help us to seek out other funders and to sponsor smaller incremental raises on their own platforms. And so that is when you have a team lead who has agreed to not only give, but to help raise a certain amount. And so that spreads the work and spreads the effort more broadly so that all of the work of a crowdfunding project is not on one person or a small group of people, because it can turn into a full-time job. And so for sponsorships and grant writing, those are traditional fundraising types. I used to write proposals quite a bit, had a very high success rate from writing proposals because I understood that you're not only writing a technical piece, making a case, there's, for example, if it's a proposal for the government and they want to support low-income areas, you can write the technical piece and put the data in there about why this area qualifies. But even they want to hear the story. And so I understood that you have to still have a compelling case for grant writing and for grants to be secured, because again, it's all so very competitive. Sponsorships are those that are when you have corporations who want to support you and who want to donate and have their sponsorship, their gift written off on there as a corporate donation. So it's a tax deductible gift. And individuals can do that as well if it's a 501c3 nonprofit. And then now social media fundraising is where, again, we have our online platforms where there's a structure around fundraising, and it's all done through Facebook or other social media platforms. Amazon used to have a program. I forget the name of it. Amazon, it was the holiday campaign that they used to run. And so they would ask for anyone who wanted to donate through their social media pages to give, and they would re-gift those donations back to other nonprofits in their network. And then donor stewardship is how do you manage donors? That's so very important. You don't want to ever lose a donor. You don't ever want a donor to feel as if you that you don't appreciate their gift. And so you always want to have a structure in place for donor management and donor stewardship. And that includes cultivation of donors so that when they give at the lower level, you can eventually, for your next round or next raise, they will come back and give you a higher amount. And what was interesting and during my fundraising with universities is interesting is that we would talk to all of these very wealthy people, extremely wealthy people, but they would quite often, if it was a new donor, they would give the smallest amount possible. And this happens a lot. It's not something that I would say is happening most of the time, but on occasion we would have donors who would give a very small amount, but they were giving so that they could test your stewardship, your cultivation, your level of appreciation and gratitude shown for that very small gift. And so sometimes, if they didn't hear from you again, then they were done. But if you had this relationship, this authentic relationship that they felt was worth giving more, they absolutely would give. And so those were some of the things that we spoke about last week. Today, I want to talk about the next steps for planning. So I'm just going to assume that you are thinking about having a fundraising campaign. And what you want to start out with at the very beginning, at the very onset, is just being able to have clear messaging and clear communication around what you are doing, what it is you want, why it's important. You want to have some sort of theme that resonates with potential donors. And so for that first step, developing that theme, cause, and case for support, we want to talk through that a little bit today to get you started. And so for developing that theme for the new LaVilla, our continuing repetitive theme is that we are restoring our forgotten spaces one building at a time. That quickly captures and frames out what this project is about. This is about history. This is about our lost main streets. And this is also about not looking at this as a large development project, but as an individually community-focused project that everyone can be a part of. And so saving one building at a time is our mantra. This is our case study for how this could work. And we want to then expand this to other cities and other areas that also need support. The cause that we are championing is that we are in an impact investment project to restore a historic landmark and a historic Black Main Street in Jacksonville, Florida. So this is the cause. This is what we're championing. This is what we're rooting for, to restore this specific historic landmark in Jacksonville, Florida. And this is an impact investment project. You want to frame out that it's an impact investment project because for those who may not be interested in impact investing, they can easily back away. So for someone who's interested in investing in development projects, but they're interested in the financial returns, which are typically, going to come fast and shorter and have a higher rate of return on investment, this isn't going to be for them. Impact investments have a longer timeline for returns. And so the impact investment, donor is going to be interested more so in the case and the cause and the value that this brings to the greater community. The case for support then that resonates with this impact investor is that we're looking at economic development and job creation. So how does it support the community? We're looking at restoration and preservation. How does this, save or repurpose or have a sustainable appeal? We're looking at wealth building and legacy building. So we're, again, creating those jobs, but also looking at this district that once was a district that had more than 600 businesses located there. How do we get those legacy donors involved where they want to come back and reinvest in their dollars in bringing back businesses to this area? And it's also about pride and cultural representation, because this was a historic Black Wall Street, because it was a district where the jazz artists and Harlem Renaissance artists would come and perform and, spend their dollars and support the community. This is also about, that kind of case for support. And then it's about access and community. Some people just simply want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of the space. They want to be able to say that they are one of the investors in this space, where they can come and use the facility at a discounted rate or have certain benefits as an investor. The access that everyone else may not give is what they're looking for. And so when you're thinking about your campaign and your case and your theme and your cause, these are the things that you want to really sit down and think through. And you want to think through all the different lanes and all the different avenues and all the different opportunities that would speak to and resonate with a potential donor or investor. So this project, the new LaVilla, appeals to impact investors, economic and community advocates, and we're also targeting people who are interested in history, culture, and museum, type of structures. And we do intend to have a theme around bringing back the history through artwork, images, etc. in the building. So think about that for your project and what this could mean to you. So I'm just going to pause and see if anyone has a thought or a question they want to put in the chat. Okay, awesome. Love, heart, no questions yet. Okay, great. And And it's good to see you, Joanna. Cool. Okay. So now let's talk about the meat of today's discussion. And so when we're talking about team building, partnership building, and team management, this is the key activity that will show whether you're going to have a successful campaign. Okay, you have the clear message, you've mapped that out, you know what you are speaking to and who you are speaking to consistently. You even have talking points, you have your PowerPoints developed, all of the messaging and themes and marketing and promotional activities, language that will support the activities are in place. So we're going to assume that this is all done. And I want you to know that if you are looking at this video recording later, if you have questions that you want to put in the comments, I will look at the comments and then answer any questions that you have during the next webinar. So feel free to put those comments into the Facebook chat. Next week, we're moving to YouTube Live, so then you can find us at our new LaVilla page there. So the first thing you want to do is create clear roles for your campaign. Creating clear roles for your campaign, again, it depends on the size of the campaign, it depends on what type of campaign it is, but for most people, there is going to be that one major point person who is in an organization that would be, again, your advancement officer or development officer. And then that advancement officer or development officer may have some grant writers, may have some donor management staff roles. So the team could be a team of 3, or it could be larger. For individual non-traditional is what I'm going to call, crowdfunding and very local campaigns that may not have an organizational structure. What you want to have is your team lead. So for example, for the new LaVilla, I would be that team lead. I am the campaign developer, campaign manager, etc. And then you want to have your volunteers come on board right away. So if you can pay for some virtual assistants to support you, that is absolutely fabulous. A lot of startup campaigns, though, don't have the funds in yet. They have to wait for those funds to come in. So you want to start with your volunteers. And those volunteers will be your champions. So think about who has been in your camp 100% for as long as you can remember. Typically, that's the friend, in the larger fundraising campaigns, that's the friends and family rounds, the investment campaign types. That would be called the friend and family round. For most of us, it may be friends and family, but it may also be, as far as my position as a business advisor, it may be former clients. And I will say that former clients have been the biggest champions that I have, because I understand that if you are helping them, they want to, and you've done right by them, and you've helped them to reach their goals, then they are more than happy to turn around and help you to reach your goals. And so start with your champions. Ask your champions for very specific support. So when I say create clear roles, in this case with the new LaVilla, we are, one of the things that we learned from last year was that we needed to have these team ambassadors. And so what we're building out are team ambassadors currently, and those team ambassadors are going to be the champions for each team. And so those ambassadors are people who are more than happy to support you and donate to the campaign, and they must be people who donate so that they can say, you know what, when they go out and ask, they can say, I supported and do support this campaign and make the case for why whoever they're asking should support this campaign. It is more authentic. And so when they go out to support the campaign and to ask for other donors in their network, so these are your champions asking now their champions to support this wonderful cause, you want to give them clear instructions on what is their role. So for example, a champion would be ideally at the team 4 level, where each of them will raise $1,000. Okay, so you're not asking them to be your lead donors. You're not asking them to be your major donors. These are people who want to support you. And so you want to be realistic and reasonable about what they can give. You don't want to overextend them, and you want to keep that energy and that momentum up. And so for them, an individual donation to start, in the case of the new LaVilla, $100. But for their team, and this is an example of the peer-to-peer fundraising, you're asking each of them to find other donors to get to the $1,000 level. Now it can be higher, it can be a $3,000 level, but in my mind, I want them to feel as if it's doable and they're happy to do it. Okay. And if they want to clear that number themselves, they absolutely can. And so that would be the team 4 level. The team, and they've covered the team 5 level, the 250 level, so they can give 100, they can give more. Typically, they may give the very startup amount, like in the example I gave about the major donor, that they could give a lot more, but they want to start out small just to make sure that the momentum is right and the feel is right and that the cultivation is right. And that's absolutely fair. And so team 4 and team 5 are your champions, and you are setting the structure up to where your champions are cultivating their champions to help you to reach that team level. And so you can have 10 champions raising for you. So you can have 10 raising 1,000 each, and you hit your $10,000 goal, and you could be done if that is your target goal. For larger rounds, you're going to have teams that potentially start at $5,000 and then go up from there. So again, you think about what your total raise is, and then you break out those fundraising teams based on the capacity of each champion or major donor or investor. So for the new LaVilla, for example, we have our champions, but we also have the structure in place for just individual small giving. Any amount that you want to give just to support, please do. That's everyone, wide open. And that was the limitation of the previous campaign. We were stuck in this place where the minimum donation was $10,000. And so for people who just wanted to just support and who would call me and say, I just want to give something, this now opens up the lane for individuals to give. And it's given me a perspective around, okay, if we had an average donation of $100 for our current campaign, it's $500,000, then realistically, that could be how many people giving $100 to reach that goal. So that's the number that I'm massaging out now and thinking of, okay, what is a catchy phrase that we can use so that that sticks in everyone's mind? We need 5,000 people to give $100 and we hit our goal. And the timeline for that is over 5 months. And so you have to be careful when you're planning a year to 6 months out. We're going for the shorter timeline. We want to make sure that we adjust and take into account that with holiday seasons coming up, people do typically give more, but then there are other people who may be in a crunch. So we always want to remember how to balance that out and make sure that we communicate that to our team leads, that we really want to get ahead of the holiday season. Okay, so we're starting with our champions. So think about who are your champions and take out a sheet of paper and just write out that list. And you want to write out as many people as possible. For us, we are looking for champions to each month to start. So we're looking for 20 champions this month. And by the end of the campaign, 20 each month, we want to have 100 champions who have raised $1,000 amongst their other champions in their communities. So that is how we want to structure that. Now, there is a very intense communication strategy, marketing strategy, promotion strategy that has to support that. And so one of the things that we're doing is, well, typically people want or they feel as if they have something tangible that they can hold on to, a souvenir or something like that, in exchange for their gift. So we're working on a very nice campaign where we can give gifts to the champions, but also when a person makes a certain level of donation, they will get a legacy gift. And so we'll talk about that more once we get all of the artwork and the specs in for that. So look forward to hearing more about that very soon. We want to launch that October 1. Okay, so for the champions are all set. Now we want to think about the partners. And so the partners are the groups that will help you to put together your volunteer core. And so your volunteer core is anyone who feels an affinity to any one of the cases for support that we mentioned. And so right now, what our first priority affinity group is that we're looking at are entrepreneurs, because it's going to be an entrepreneurship center. But more specifically, we're looking at museums and their members, people who appreciate the larger context of the project, the new LaVilla, the different aspects of history that LaVilla touches on, and any opportunity to sustain and preserve and protect the culture and the meaning and the value behind what this community once represented. And so we're building out and joining different museums that have consistent, similar messages that align with the new LaVilla. So for example, here in Florida, we have the American Museum, which is on American Beach. It was the only beach that was available to African Americans during the period of segregation. It was founded by one of the first African American millionaires here in Florida. And the story behind how that museum was built mirrors the new LaVilla. And in fact, some of the founders of that beach lived here in LaVilla because LaVilla was the segregated district. And so the members and the volunteers who are involved with that museum would have a higher probability of wanting to give, even if it's a one-time gift, to the new LaVilla. And typically it's a one-time gift because they also have a commitment to the American Beach Museum. And some of those people have enough income to be able to support both. And so that's the beauty of finding these individuals who are already a part of a organized group, or who are part of a system, community, or structure that can pour right back into what you're doing. We were LaVilla was founded by former Union soldiers. So one of the things that we are looking into is how can we have a partnership with Buffalo Soldier Museum in Texas. So what could that look like? They recently closed out, or they may be close to closing out, an active campaign that they're involved in, but there's still value in uh, participating in or partnering with them to tell the story of the new LaVilla. And when I think about and pull back and think about, okay, if we have a campaign, 5,000 people giving $100, then that sounds like an easier case to make when you're going after, again, these donors of affinity groups. It's a simple one-time case to make. And that's what you usually want to say, is that this is a one-time gift that will make a major impact in the community and have residual effects in other communities. And this must be a successful campaign. So that's how you want to think about, how do you target those affinity group volunteers? On the entrepreneurship side, we are looking at organizations and memberships that are largely women. I will say that because that is my passion spot, helping women to create economic equity through entrepreneurship. But when I think about women, I'm also supporting families. And so when I approach women's organizations who have been around during the civil rights movement, so long-standing women's rights organizations who focus on entrepreneurs, who focus on community, who focus on family, that is another affinity group. And so again, you want to build out your list of champions and then target those affinity group volunteers. So create those lists and then start to have those conversations. Now that's the kind of slow paced part of it. You want to look for individuals to make introductions. That is the ideal way, is to have a soft introduction. Sometimes it's just sending emails to the person on a regularly scheduled basis. But I will say that everybody now is so busy that sometimes you just have to show up. And so what I talk about a lot is how to be strategic about showing up in places that they value. So supporting their conferences, supporting their local chapters, anything like that to give you face time where you can have a conversation with another member or another leader in that organization. That will give you, that'll save you some lead time on just making those calls and hoping that that email or that call is going to be a priority. You're in a time crunch in terms of raising those dollars, and so you want to accelerate the process as much as possible, but do it in a genuine, authentic way where you're also giving value and leading with gratitude. So one thing that I always say is lead with gratitude and lead with grace, and offer a gift of information, support. And when I say support, I mean physical support, helping them out with something, because are already in a raise. And so giving away what you've raised is not the method to win another donor. The way to win another donor is to lead with gratitude by giving them something of value that they can use that will also help them. And sometimes that comes down to just giving them referrals. So just think about what that could be. Okay, let's talk about any questions so far. Look at my chat. Okay, the cat is here. So if you hear her purring, that's my husband's cat. All right, so let's go into how do we establish a fundraising rhythm? So establishing a fundraising rhythm has everything to do with looking at your end state. Where do you want to be at the end of this campaign? And how much do you want to raise looking back at each and every increment to make sure that you are on goal. And if you're not on goal, to make those adjustments in real time to get you back on track. So what is working, what is not working, and being very intentional around collecting that data and collecting that information. One thing that we used in larger organizations, we use paid subscriptions, expensive paid subscriptions every day. And so we would have our LexisNexis, which would allow us to research individuals of, of means, of greater wealth. We would use, the donor management software, Donor Perfect. I mean, there's so many different variations of fundraising tools that are out there, and wealth tracking tools that are out there. You'd be surprised. So that is how we would track. And I take it for granted that a lot of grassroots independent fundraisers don't have the opportunity or access to these expensive subscriptions. And so, um, you know, larger organizations are starting already with an advantage. And so it's going to take smaller independent nonprofits, individual donors. You're gonna have a longer runway before you hit your goals. And so that is why you want to be so very intentional about tracking and monitoring progress, making sure that everyone understands their role, and that you have workarounds and alternatives in place for when you don't reach those goals. And so I would build out every year, I would build out a slide deck of not only the fundraising team and who's on the team, but at each level, I identify the specific target. Target, is the individual we want to cultivate, how much we thought, or and thought is based on a metric. So, how much we thought they would give, and that's based on our research. And that research, it could boil down to just what is the value of any real estate that they own, taking a percentage of that, because we did not have access to stock and private investment information. I think we do more so now in some cases, but overall, we had to look at what they owned. So real estate properties, any vehicles or luxury boats, anything that we could wrap our head around. The schools potentially that their children, I feel like a stalker now, the feeling, the schools potentially that their children attended, what is the tuition, anything that could give us information on setting a realistic fundraising target. And that all boiled down to, if we had a person already set and ready to either make the ask. So this is a person who's already in our network or already in our, donor advised groups, who could make an introduction and an ask, or if it was going to be a longer runway to raise money, then we assigned a development officer, or the VP would take on that prospect depending on what the level of the ask was. So there's an entire team at these institutions who are responsible for bringing in these very large sums of money to the organization. The beautiful thing about very large endowed, and that's a word as well, organizations, is that they already have, for in the example of universities, graduates who are already appreciative, and they have an entire list of graduates, and they have an entire list of, legacy students. And so they've been building this for year after year after year after year after year. Everyone is not in that situation. So I'm talking to the independent individuals and the small grassroots nonprofits who are learning this and trying to figure out how systematic they need to be in order to raise funds. It is and it can be a full-time, highly engaged activity. And that is what I'm building now, is building a team around making sure that everyone who needs to hear the story of LaVilla first hears the story. Anyone that we can educate and teach in the process, because I value that equally, to be quite frank, is, how do we get the word out in real time about what their fundraising campaign can look like, and how we can all just support each other. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we just all had a system or a group or a process in place where we can all just make that call and hit that target? So what does that look like? Universities already have that system. Independently, we can build our own system, but it's again, it's a very well structured and thought out system. But it can so be done. It can easily be done. And so, raising money for health and, really heartfelt campaigns, um, you know, are typically the more successful ones when it comes to crowdfunding. But the community exists for individuals who believe in community building and impact investing. We just have to coalesce and find out where each other is situated. Any questions? I think I have about 10 minutes. Okay, so we are almost here. So establish that fundraising rhythm. So that is, by what point should we raise this amount, by what number of people to hit our goal by this date? The fundraising rhythm also has to fold into the messaging. So the messaging has to be in alignment as well. So you want to identify those communication and marketing platforms that you're going to use. There are so many, but depending on one or two or even three nowadays is not going to get you to where you want to go. So that is why we're moving to YouTube. Next week is, how do you get in front of as many people as you can, and tell your story to as many people as you can. The donor tracking and tools. So we have just moved to Give Butter. Before we were on Vestor. Give Butter is, again, one of those many fundraising, crowdfunding platforms that you can choose from. They all have learned or have adapted to small fundraisers, where they now ask for the donor. They give the donor a choice if they want to pay the platform fees, or if they want to, pass those, just pass those fees to the to the organization they're donating to. So there's a choice. Most people are very kind and generous, and they will go ahead and add their fee to their base donation. If your base donation is $100 and the fee is 6%, then that 6%, the donor will usually go ahead and pay for it, but they have the choice of paying for it. Otherwise, it comes out of your total amount raised. So look at those donor tracking tools, look at some free ones. Those are the best ones for donor. The donor tracking, donor management is usually built in to those tracking tools as well. You will still need a manual VA or someone to put eyes on building those lists. So importing new names, tracking and organizing them by team. So you will need someone to do that for you. All right, and that's the tracking and who's tracking. You know who is giving you your reports so that you can know where you are when. It's so very important. And when you need to really lean in and take it up a notch in terms of your fundraising activities. Again, it could be a full-time job for one person, two people, three people, but if you spread it across your champions, you know, it's absolutely doable, but make sure that they are true champions. And if you have a champion who just can't do it, that is perfectly fine. Rotate them in. That's why you want to continue to build that list of champions and not limit the number of champions that you have. We're shooting for 100 by the end of the campaign. And so that so far has been making calls to everyone, and that does take out time. So make sure that time is blocked out. Okay. And then your fundraising rounds and milestone markers. So your fundraising rounds, if you don't hit that goal, you can have a second round for fundraising and you can build that into the strategy, which is what I've done. So our first round here is $500,000. We know we need to get to 2 million. So we're looking at a capital stack of 500,000. I was speaking to a banker, Lendistry. Thank you so much. He was so helpful. The CEO of Lendistry gave me the formula I was looking for in terms of, you know, what percentage needs to be privately raised before lenders will look at either, you know, matching that or giving you more than a match. So that's the $500,000 that we're going for. Then the lending piece of it, and then looking at hard money lenders to fulfill any balance. And so that's the mix. That mix may change as we continue to move forward, but having a clear strategy in place is what we're working towards. And that is giving us the confidence we need to be successful. All right. Any questions at all? Wonderful. So to get a hold of us, so, you know, there's several different moving parts that are happening here to raise for the new LaVilla. And it's really about being seen and being heard. If you are raising and people don't know you and they haven't seen you, it is you're going to have to level it up and really get out there. It is so challenging when you are your personality is more of a behind the scenes personality, but you must push past that and get out there and do it. And so some of the things that we're working on is our LinkedIn newsletter, Lost Fortunes, Lasting Lessons, where we're talking about Black women who created wealth before the Civil Rights Movement. And that is to continue talking about culture, inspiring others to support these historic spaces that we are losing quickly. Fast to Grow Small Margins is about entrepreneurship and women entrepreneurs that I work with currently. We again have the product that we're developing to help us with our raise. So giving a mixed bag and as many mixed options that you can give to donors is always a win-win. So if you need to reach me, email is see@the-new-LaVilla. The website is thenewlavilla.com. Please just have a look at the story of Miss Fannie Harvey and the Will Hotel. This is her space that we're bringing back to life. And please consider donating to the new LaVilla at the URL there. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Next week, I'm doing these topics as issues come up with the new LaVilla. So we'll walk through the talking points. But again, I'll also look at the Q&A and we'll answer any questions that anyone has. So thank you all so much. I will hang on until the last person drops, but have a wonderful evening. And it's so great to see you. I hope to see you next week. Thank you, ladies.